Welcome back, everybody. This is Aretha in New York City. I hope you can hear me. Today I'll be talking about Nina Simone, one of my favorites. Her given name was Eunice Kathleen Waymont. She was born on February 21st, 1933, in a small resort town in Tyrone, North Carolina. Her mother, Mary Kate Irvin, was a pious, well-known Methodist preacher and worked sometimes as a housekeeper. And her father, John Divine Waymont, worked as an entertainer, barber, and dry cleaner. Nina was a musical prodigy, and to her mom's surprise, started playing at the age of 3. The family's home was filled with music, but her mother did not approve of non-religious music such as blues and jazz. Nina had a special bond with her father, who was a self-confident, cheerful man who enjoyed making her laugh and watching her perform. Nina wrote, "Dad's favorite was the Darktown Stratas Ball, and he'd sneak up in the day when Mama was out and get me to play it. He'd sit by the window or outside on the porch, and if he saw Mama coming down the road, he'd whistle, the signal for me to switch to a more righteous tune." Nina's musical gifts were supported by the family and local community. Her mother's employer paid for piano lessons with a white British woman called Muriel Mazanovich, or Miss Massey, who Nina referred to as her white mama. Miss Massey trained Nina in European classical music, specializing in Sebastian Bach. Miss Massey also created a music fund for Nina's education, and this was supported by black and white people in the community. The plan was that Nina would pursue a career as a classically trained musician. The proceeds from the fund went to paying for a private boarding school for high school. It was called Allen High School for Girls, where she graduated as a valedictorian. It paid for a year at the Juilliard School for Performing Arts in New York City. However, Nina's dream of becoming a classically trained musician was dashed when she was rejected by the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. This desire to be recognized as a classically trained musician remained a big part of her musical identity. And that made me think about, why was it important to her? Is it some kind of internalized racism that makes her think that playing classical music is better than other things? But it could also be because her mom was religious, and classical music was not seen as not religious. And that's another thing about white supremacy. It demonizes anything that does not originate from white people. So even seeing jazz as not religious music, that's another thing. Let me carry on with Nina. After the Juilliard, needing to help her family, Nina had to find a job. And one of her students she was teaching told her about working in the nightclubs in Jersey, Atlantic City. But Nina did not want her mom to know that she was moonlighting in nightclubs, so she changed her name from Eunice to Nina. She created a stage name, Nina, and she took that name from a boyfriend she had at the time. He called her Nina, and the Simone came from a French actress. Nina thought this was necessary to have a stage name because she said to her mother that working in a nightclub would have been no different from working in the fires of hell. Nina started singing because her boss threatened to fire her if she did not. She still wanted to be a pianist. However, later she became a musician that took pride in performing in multiple genres: classical style, jazzy cocktails, spirituals, and children's songs, something like a folk singer. This musical variety and excellence resulted in her being called the High Priestess of Soul. And in my mind, a High Priestess of Soul is a secular version of her preacher mom. Though Stokely Michael, the man who coined the term Black Power, called Nina the only singer of the civil rights movement, Nina was originally resistant to create music for the civil rights movement. Nina felt the issues in the black community and the civil rights movement were too complex to make a 3-minute song out of. She thought that would dilute the issues and strip it of its dignity. However, there would be two events that served as catalysts for her joining the movement. The first was the murder of Medgar Evers, and the second was the bombing of the children in the Birmingham church bombing of September 15th, 1963. And yes, of course, there was a cost to participating in the civil rights movement. Nina wrote, "People who lived through those times, doing the same things I did, living and breathing the revolution, will tell you the same stories of how their private lives faded away for years at a time. The first thing I saw in the morning when I woke up was my black face in the bathroom mirror, and that fixed what I felt about myself for the rest of the day, that I was a black-skinned woman in a country where you could be killed because of that one fact." In terms of her private life, Nina was married twice and had one daughter with her second husband. The name of her daughter was Lisa Simone Kelly. Her first husband was Don Ross. Her second husband was Andrew Stroud, and he was a former New York City detective who was an excellent manager, but was reported to have been physically abusive to Nina. And her daughter, Lisa, also accused Nina of being physically abusive towards her. Nina Simone was a person with a mental health diagnosis. Nina Simone first experienced an episode of bipolar disorder in 1967. However, it would take 20 years for her to receive a diagnosis. And in retrospect, many of her behaviors that were described as diva-like, mean, and erratic were evidence of her disease. Further, when bipolar disorder is left untreated, it worsens. Nina wrote about her first episode. "Andy walked into my dressing room and found me staring into the mirror, putting makeup in my hair, brown makeup, because I wanted to be the same color all over," she writes. "He tried to get me to talk sense, but I said things like, I was Grandma Moses, I had visions of laser beams and heaven with skin, always skin, involved in it somewhere." One of the key takeaways for me is how the disease of mental illness can be viewed as a character flaw and not as an illness, and how failure to seek help can make the situation worse. Many of the actions taken by Nina Simone could actually have just been her disease. She abandoned her family and left for Barbados in 1969. She abandoned her beloved father and disowned him because she overheard him brag about keeping the family afloat financially. When she knew it was her mother who did so, she did not respond to his deathbed appeals to see him. And you know, from the beginning, I told you how she loved him and had a bond. And during a Casablanca show, she chased a fan with a knife. So it was tough. And this went on until in the 80s. At her lowest point in Paris, she was begging passerbys to come in to see her show. She was able to rebuild her career after she started taking her medication for her illness. But she still had those episodes because the condition had gotten so bad because it was not treated properly. And she died peacefully in her sleep in her home in the French seaside town of Carry-le-Roi on April 21, 2003. So that's it. The beautiful, beautiful Nina Simone. I try to listen to her every day. Thank you so much for listening.